Wars, but Beat Street was our introduction into the New York b-boy rap sneaker. I mean, that whole film just was like, dude, I can still watch that shit today.
Yeah, it
Oh,
was the first Hollywood produced motion picture, documenting the culture. But before that, for us in New York, we had the first hip hop documentary called Style Wars, which was filmed in '83 and came on PBS in '84.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
If you want a real, introduction, at the timeline, just go through the timeline. Let's just say, I mean, we're all, we're in it, we're living it decades now, but the real timeline of it for folks like me growing up was running home and seeing Style Wars on PBS, going, "Yo, somebody captured what we're actually out here doing in a film."
And that shit came out in 1983, Sean.
Produced in '83, hit PBS in '84. Same, timeline as B Street and Wild Style and everything else. Those three films are the pivotal and most important films.
Can't forget about
You know,
Wild Style.
but somebody finally documented this thing that was a mystery to a lot of folks and put it in a Hollywood produced film for it to spread. So now you began to see all of those elements. But again, you're talking, you said, a movie produced in '83, released in '84, and we've been doing all of this stuff and living all of this stuff, especially even some of the cats who are older than us,
Mhm.
since the late '60s and early '70s.
Wow.
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 So it's a full decade of unknown experiences growing up in New York City with all of these things happening that finally hit TV, radio. There's no internet, so the only other way, and my friend Cool DJ Red Alert says,
Mhm.
the cassette tape was the internet of our times.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That was it. That was the way the music spread. On top of finally some other radio stations across the country trying to trickle in one or two hip hop songs a week. A week. But slowly over time, and I say all that again to say that, again, when I speak, I'm speaking about a full hip hop experience. I'm just not speaking about one aspect. And how it ties to the life work that I do in sneakers is I'm making sure that people everywhere, when I teach them, never leave behind that fact that this thing you love so much that you own hundreds of pairs of, you know, the language that you use and all of these things that represent what sneaker culture is are birthed in hip hop. You cannot separate them. As much as the sneaker industry itself is on pace to be a $100 billion global industry between next year and the year after, you still can't separate its rise from hip hop.
It's interesting that you say that because, man, when I reflect on just hearing what you were saying, even going to Star Wars, going far back, that sometimes I almost feel like there's a level of being cheated. Like it's almost like, okay, does New York get, does the Bronx get, does your time, your era get the credit that they deserve for being the hip hop pioneers from a holistic perspective?
Cultural perspective.
Well, culturally, considering where hip hop is globally now, um, there's two ways for me to answer it. There's the yes, in terms of the lore and the hype and all the things that get documented to say, yes, it started in New York. There's a debate going on whether it started in the Bronx or not. I'm not going to touch that. I'm
Yep.
not going to touch that because I have my own opinion on that. That'll be for another time.
Yep.
But the thing that we're missing collectively is we don't own a lot of the business entities
That's where I was getting
and,
ready to
and,
go.
and systems that have been set up to take advantage of hip hop's global popularity. So there are a lot of people who really feel, slighted and are angry about that.
Mhm.
And Again, another time, another show, we're partly to blame.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I get where you're going because I was actually that's where I was leaning into because I really was thinking just from an ownership perspective, but we see that kind of across the board in a lot of things that our culture has done that has even from the perspective of breakdancing. I mean, you know what I mean? That's kind of been bit and reshaped and reformed, and it's like
Yeah.
it didn't evolve or begin in other cultures. That began in our culture. So
It's the thing that I like that Grandmaster Caz and Sha Rock say on their show on Sirius XM, their show That's the Joint. They end every show by saying something that is such a important statement that is always overlooked. And it's the fact that hip hop didn't invent anything. It reinvented everything.
Mm.
So all of these debates about people rapping in the 30s and they were doing those kind of moves in the 50s and 60s, and
Yeah.
you're missing the point of what hip hop actually is.
Yeah.
Turntables existed before hip hop. No shit. Clowns existed before hip hop.
absolutely,
Like, where are we going with this?
that's right.
It's
Right.
anyone who goes in this direction with always trying to, you know, do this weird, etymology, if you will, for lack of a better way to say it, of all these dissecting the elements and saying where they all started. And graffiti was started before quote unquote hip hop. Like, graffiti goes back centuries.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Absolutely.
The Aztec dynasties. That's all graffiti.
So I mean, you're missing the point of
Yeah,
what hip hop is when you got to go that far back to try and make your point about certain elements.
Yeah.
Kaz says it best. Hip hop didn't invent anything, but it reinvented everything.
Yeah.
do you think that's just a very difficult concept for people to accept?
Of course it is, because it's not their culture. It's always the people who aren't from it who try to dissect it and make these silly ass points. But those of us who've been around long enough and lived it, we know exactly what Kaz means when he says that.
Mm.
Man, I just wish that people had this next level of understanding that you're giving us today, man. Um, what we also want to do, Sean, is we want to,
Yeah.
because I want to give you an opportunity, man, to talk about the SSCA, man, the academy, because
Yeah.
what you're doing over there is exactly what we've been talking about. It's interesting because I'm looking right now at, you guys' belief statement,
Mhm.
and it says that sneakers are more than just required equipment for sports. It's almost like you guys are saying, listen, I'm trying to get y'all to reframe and rethink how you see what this
Yeah.
culture is really about. Talk to us a little bit, man, about what the Social Studies Community Academy does and where is it heading?
So it's actually really, I want you to see the actual article of footwear different first. I look at a pair of sneakers and I see 20 jobs. I
Mm,
don't just see the cool colors that match my next outfit.
Damn. 20?
break it down. You gotta break it down.
You gotta remember that someone designed them. There's a marketing piece, there's a development, there's lawyers, there's people who work at these companies who have nothing to do with the creative side of it that are just as important to the process of making a sneaker as everybody else.
Mm.
That's what we teach here at the Academy. We're a non design related program that allows people to see a sneaker for the business that it is, the multi-billion-dollar business that it is.
Damn.
And being able to have people think differently about the very sneaker on their feet gives them more of a chance to think about educationally and business wise where they could go in their careers, find jobs and roles doing something that actually means something to them, that they really enjoy. Um, Appreciate, educate, elevate, appreciate the culture. We educate people about it. And ultimately, through all the people that we've taught and mentored and supported, that's elevation of sneaker culture and the sneaker business on a whole. The timeline of everything really starts like this.